Good evening, and once again, it's time to look back on the week before and to see what's coming up this week in week four. And primarily, the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at the overall operations of teams and talking about profitability and does a team need to generate profit, beginning to introduce the concept of whether teams need to be building value. And I even asked in a couple of the comments I made on discussion boards comments about would you rather make a profit or make money? And some of you would probably wonder, well, isn't that the same thing? And I think as we go forward, we're going to see that it's not necessarily the same thing. And it has to do with the outlook and the planning horizon and how you view your problems that you're trying to solve as short-term issues or long-term issues. So just keep that little question in mind as we look at some of the newer issues. But this week, we're going to actually move into something that might be almost a little bit more fun, if you will. But the idea is this way we're going to talk more about some things that actually intrude directly onto the field and to look at what's called competitive balance. And leagues try to maintain competitive balance between their participants, between their teams, for a lot of reasons. We think it's so that, when we watch our team, that everybody's got an equal chance to win or an equal chance starting out the year. We often hear people say, boy, the NFL would love it if everybody went 8-8 and made the playoffs. But, as you can see, some teams are a little more equal than others. Some struggle. Some struggle for years and years and years. Others turn into what we like to call dynasties. Well, how do they do this? And how do leagues react when this happens? And this week you're going to see a lot of material that talks about different systems for maintaining competitive balance in the sport itself. And primarily we're going to look at things in, of course, American sports. So we'll look at things like the draft, the reverse order draft, which most leagues use in some form, right? Where the team that finishes last gets the first pick of incoming players. That seems a fair way to do it. But then you see there's twists on it, like the NBA lottery. And I've even included a little article where somebody speculated on what would the NFL look like if they used a draft lottery instead of the straight reverse order finish that they do use. So those items are in there. Really like you to look at that piece from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston where they've divided, like I said, instead of chapters, we call it innings. Well, this week, look at inning 7. It really explains how things work. What mechanisms do teams use, and what are the economic consequences? Because they don't all just use the draft. I said teams, I meant leagues. They don't just use the draft. They use revenue sharing. They use luxury taxes on payrolls. They use salary caps. This time in the off season in football, that's almost all we hear about are really economic and business issues. It involves on the field moves, but what in the end are we looking at? The business issues, the economic issues. And I've also included some lengthy pieces on an alternative form of maintaining competitive balance, and those of us who are soccer people are really familiar with it, but it's the method that goes on all across the world, and it's called promotion and relegation, where leagues are divided up into higher and lower orders of league. And in order to participate in that highest league, guess what? You've got to win. And for instance, in English soccer, the last 4 teams, is it 4 now these days? I forget. The last finishers in one league are, quote, sent down, right? And they have to compete the next year in the lowest league, while the top finishers in the league just below them are brought up to the higher league. Well, is this fair competitively? Sure, it seems on the surface, but what are the economic consequences? If you move from the English League Championship, which is the second division, up to the Premier League, which is the top division, it means a lot more revenue and a lot more economic success for your team. Well, there's an incentive not to finish last. Whereas sometimes we think in the reverse order draft system, there is a bit of an incentive to finish last. So what does this do to competition? Does it heighten it? Does it lessen it? What about when Major League Baseball just a couple years ago added that single game, one more round of playoffs, that single game to see who actually gets into the division series? That was an interesting one. Did it heighten interest? Did it make more money for the league? Did it prove to be an economic benefit? These are the kind of things we'll be looking at. So I think you're going to find this week a real interesting balance between the competitive stuff, the stuff we see going on the field, and what we see going on in the front offices all over. All right? So that's really the emphasis this week. I really want people to pay attention to it. If you really, I think the articles and the readings and resources this week are really good. Some of them may seem a little bit lengthy, but it really takes the time to plow your way through them. Read them before you answer the discussion question, okay? And in the discussion, make sure that when you state an opinion, try to back it up with something that came from the readings and resources or your personal observations. I think people are doing better. As I said, I'm going to be a little bit more rigorous as we go ahead each week and in the grading and things. And one of the reasons is I want people to get used to not just stating an opinion, but tell us all why. Because as I said to many of you in my comments, you've got some really good ideas. Try to spend a little bit more time if you can, because your good ideas pull the best ideas out of the other folks in the class. And that's really going to help everybody. Okay, so great job so far. I think we're making some good progress. I hope you're taking the time to read the material before you comment. That's really one thing I want to make sure we do, because an informed comment leads to a livelier discussion, and that's what we want out of this. Okay, so again, if there's any questions, as many of you have, contact me, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.